Okay. Alrighty, thank you all for coming. I'm Summer, I'm the curator here at the museum. As Thea just reminded us, please turn off or silence your phone so we don't have any disruptions. So a couple of announcements. Registration is now open for our annual summer camp for ages 6 through 12 called the Golden Age Firsts in Fernandina. The camp focuses on music, math, art, science, and history from around the world at the time. Registration is open until June 5th, and the camp is from June 12th to 16th from 9 to 12 p.m., and you can sign up on our website for that. And now Thea has an announcement on behalf of America's youth, right?
Right. Under the boardwalk. That's all I can say, but the drifters are coming to town. So, I'm sure none of you remember any of their songs, right? Exactly. I thought I was too young to. Anyway, the drifters are going to be here at Trinity Church, which you know is next to the Bailey House, and they are giving a concert there. This is a once-in-a-lifetime chance to see them live, up close and personal. And the tickets for the general admission at the concert are $50. You'll want to get them in advance. You can buy them right here at the museum. They will not be sold at the door. The other opportunity you have is to actually meet and greet them. Hi, how are you? You're okay, yeah. Okay. And we're selling those tickets as well. So 2 events, 2 different tickets. I know your next question is how much? Your next question is
how much? That's the meet and greet.
The meet and greet is $65. Right here at the museum, you get to have a photo op with them, purchase a book, see them, talk to them, and enjoy the time up close and personal. The concert is, how much is the
$50?
Oh, you read the paper. Okay. Yes, the concert is $50 and the tickets are available here as well. Yes.
Are they in the Hall of Fame? The Rock and Roll
Yes.
Hall of Fame?
Yes, they're in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
And what date is it, Thea?
And the date is Sunday, May 28th. Now I know you're thinking, well, wait a minute, that's Memorial Day weekend, but what a great way to start, right? Before the Monday. Hey, Sharon, you would be probably invited up to sing with them because she has a great voice. So, ladies and gentlemen, you can see this right downstairs on our front door, and please support America's youth. That's where the proceeds go to, and the Interfaith Dinner. Thank you.
Okay, so as for regular upcoming programs here at the museum, in recognition of Pride Month, our June Brown Bag Lunch on June 7th will be a live oral history with members of the local LGBTQ community. And then our June 3rd on 3rd on June 16th is the opening of our next temporary exhibit. It's going to be called Earth and Heat, Amelia Island Pottery Past and Present. The exhibit takes a broad look at pottery from native Timucuan works up until contemporary potters working on the island today. And the exhibit will open with a talk by Dr. Neil Wallace. He's the Associate Curator of Ceramic Technology Lab at the Florida Museum of Natural History in Gainesville. And he'll be discussing ancient indigenous pottery in Northeast Florida. So that's it for announcements, but tonight we have Jose Miranda. Jose Miranda has been the president and principal architect of Miranda Architects since 2001. He previously worked in North Carolina, Tampa, and Williamsburg, Virginia as an architect and historic preservationist. And he currently serves on the board of Fernandina Beach Main Street. So everyone please welcome Jose.
Thank you. One of the things I get a little nervous about is when there's a camera, because I know the camera adds 10 or 15 pounds. So for those of you on YouTube, you're probably looking at a Puerto Rican Yeti with a fancy shirt. But I'm here to kind of take you on a journey. I'm your tour guide on this story of the Schoolhouse Inn. We were lucky enough to actually have our offices in that building for almost 8 years when we were asked by a client to study the building for potential use as a boutique hotel. So I do have a lot of slides, about 260 of them. Not all of them we're going to linger on. Some of them we're going to fly by because I understand I've got 45 minutes if I want to leave some room for questions. So we're going to walk you through the process, what we do as architects, especially when it comes to historic preservation. And it's, like I said, we're guiding you along this tour, and hopefully we'll have some time at the end for questions. So let me get started. Okay. With every preservation project, the first thing you start with is the building history. We end up, especially locally, our first stop is the museum. One of the things that we start to study is what is the history of the building over time. One of the resources that we use are the Sanborn fire insurance maps that have been done going back to the late 1800s all the way up to the 1940s. These fire insurance maps are, you can see, this one's from 1891 here in Fernandina. And right here is that little red arrow. There's our public school number 1, built in 1886. Now these all of these buildings are basically showing you the type of structure that they are. For example, yellow means it's a wood frame building. Red means that it's masonry or brick. So you can get an idea of the history of buildings. Here's Zion Baptist Church, actually the original configuration, which was in wood before it burned down. So this is where we started out. This tells us that at 1891, this was the configuration of the building. And as we go forward in time, look, here's 1897. You can kind of see, building has stayed the same shape. And you can see the other buildings as they march forward in time.
Jose?
Yes?
It looks like Center Street was up a lot further.
Yeah, well,
Which
that's
is
correct.
now Atlantic.
That's correct, because Center Street was the original name of the street before it got changed to Atlantic. And you'll notice that in some cases it's Center ER, in other cases it's RE. So here we are. This is now 1903. Now here they changed it. Here it's yellow on the inside and brick on the outside. What the cartographer basically updated was it's actually brick veneer and wood framed on the inside, and that'll be part of the story we learn as we start to uncover. Don't ever get fooled just because there's brick on the outside. That doesn't mean that it's a brick building. Sometimes it's just a brick veneer. It's just a skin. And so that's what we learned kind of the hard way on this building. So here we are, 1903. And then, here we are, 1909. So we know that between 1903 and 1909, there was an addition added to the back of the building, an extension of the school, and it was 2-story. And you can see that it's still that pink red color around the perimeter and yellow on the inside. So it's wood framed with a brick veneer. And you can see over here that there's this dashed line indicates there was a little porch on the side. And we'll kind of go through that as we go through the journey here, discovering the kind of the history of the building. Next thing, we have, as you know, we stop here at the museum. We take a look at historic photographs because we want to know what was the shape, configuration of the building compared to what we see today. So you can see its original shape here. This is New Zion Baptist Church, which was wood framed originally before it burned down, and then it became brick building. So again, picture postcard. The curious part is school number 1, white, obviously a sign of the times when this postcard was done. But you can see that the overall original shape of the building and a little fenced side yard. Now I want you to notice, see this little oak tree right here? It's still there. It's not that size anymore. But you'll notice as we march forward in time that that's kind of our tell of where the location is of the pictures that we see, because you see the tree grow over time. So here also what's important is we started to look at historic photographs showing some of the classes that graduated from this public school. And what we learned from here, we look at the background to see, oh look, there's the front door. these windows, so you can tell where this picture was taken from. You can see this is from 1898. And not only, it's curious, I know that my wife, who loves costume history, can always tell, even if there's no date, can always give me a timeline of when that picture was taken based on what clothing was being worn. So I'm going to click through several of these as they march forward in time. Here's 1924. Again, this is the front of the building. You can see the front door had these large kind of barn shutters that were almost like a storm panel. There weren't the fancy steps that are in the building now, and we'll show you those as we march through time. But these are all marching forward. All of these available through the Museum of History. And we look at what the detailing was in the building. You'll keep an eye on this little thing that says here, that's our little cornerstone, which we know about. Again, photograph in the front of the building. And we look in the background, always to see what the building looked like in particular snapshots. Okay, here's our tree again as a marker. It's a little bigger now. And you can just see beyond, this is New Zion, the shape of it more recently when it became a brick building after the fire. So we'll probably date this as teens or 20s, just based on the size of the tree and everything else that's happening along the street side. Okay, our first step after we learn the history is we've got to measure everything, because we need to know how big it is before we start designing anything. These are kind of the tools of the trade. We actually physically measure the building with tape measures, cameras. We had to have 1 million pencils because the leads always break. This fancy device that was actually created by my dear wife measures wall thickness. It's a caliper. We just created our own. And our recent addition is this little bug-eyed guy. It's a little drone. We've been doing overflying of buildings to look at roof lines or details that we can't see from the ground level. So that's been a really good tool. So as we get into this, we start field measuring and taking 1 million photographs of existing conditions. Here's that cornerstone, that District School number 1, 1886. So you can see that's the cornerstone of the original building. And as we go around this, these are all pictures from when the building was up for sale in around 2017. And at this point in time, it was all offices in the building. It was used as a public school all the way up to 1927 when the school was built, which is now the administration building across the street from Central Park. In 1927, it had a variety of uses. It was a Masonic temple, it was a public library, and then it became offices. You know, like I said, we were in there for quite a number of years, so we're very intimately familiar. So we go around the building, photographing everywhere. Here's our tree friend. Obviously, he's decided to push some of these pavers out of the way as he got bigger. But you'll notice a lot of the changes, all these later additions, planting beds and everything else that became. But you'll notice the windows were still in pretty good, well, I wouldn't say pretty good shape. We'll reveal that later. But at least the original proportions were still there. The building had not been modified drastically. They look like old doors, not historic doors. They just look that way. These brick steps were a later addition. You can tell from the historic photographs that they were just real simple steps going up, not this landing the way it was done. So we went around the entire building, and we probably take hundreds of photographs, just every nook and cranny. And we're going to go around the building, because as we get into this, we start to learn all kinds of things. There's also on the corner of the building, there's a USGS marker as a landmark that surveyors use to say, okay, here's a starting point that we know where this is on the map of the world. From this point, I can measure what's around. So that building's been there so long that it warranted its own marker, because I knew it wasn't going anywhere. So as we come around the side of the building, as you can see, this is the original shape of the building. This is that 1909 addition. And you'll notice the brick looks a little different. So we start to take pictures of all the details, and you can see, here's 1886, here's 1909. This brick is a little orangey versus this one being red. The other thing we learned from photographs is you can tell where old openings were bricked in. So this was probably a taller door or a door-window combination. You can see where the old brick arch was. So all these are things that we discover as we start field measuring. So I'm going to kind of run you around the building. You can see the obviously modern equipment added on, steps that weren't historic. They were just convenience for means of egress. Obviously, utilities, where do those go? Well, we just slap it on the outside of the facade here and then cut our way into the foundation and to string it along. So we're going around the back side of the building. This was a fire stair that was added on in the late 70s, early 80s. It's on the back of the building. I'm going to come around the building. Now, take a look at this. This is what is a stucco parch coat. We think at one time there was a lean-to on the back that was either served as storage or mechanical. So on that south side of the building, you can see kind of the ghost of a roof line and this stucco parch coat that was put on there. I'm going to come around the bend. Here was a handicap ramp built in the early 80s. This is the east side of the building as we come around, and I'm going to point you to these curious little squares. Oh, decorative items that were added on. Oh my gosh, it looks like a little tie rod there. No, somebody just put it onto the outside of the building. It doesn't go through, it's just, you know, the things we learn. This is interesting because these little pockets were actually the purlins or the main rafters supporting the side porch that ran along this whole thing. And so the things that we learned just in historic photographs is like, oh my gosh, there used to be a porch. What happened to it? Oh, it was right here, because you can see where they filled in the places with brick, and you can see as they marched down along this area. So these additions, these little covered areas, these are all later additions. We knew from historic photographs and just the materials that were built from that they were not historic. Obviously, rusted power disconnects, not exactly a pretty side of the building. You can see the brickwork is like, ooh, it's in rough shape along this side. This little side porch. Here is what we call the ghost of the roof line of that side porch that ran this whole length of the building. And we're going to come around the corner, and that's basically the full Monty of what we started with. Oh, the bell tower. It was reconstructed actually in the early 80s. Because the first one obviously either blew off or was in bad shape, but even here in 2017 you can see that it's got some gaping holes, and there's a story related to that we'll show you in photographs. But here's the overall building, 1886, 1909-ish. Okay, and now we go to the inside. Very little historic fabric that was left here, but we'll point out what is. Obviously none of this is historic except the railing that we kept and salvaged. These are the steps going up to the second floor. You go down this, you can see the faded carpet, and you know, obviously it had been an office for a long time. All these modern, you know, quote unquote wallpaper elements. These are the stairs going up. I'm just going to give you an overview. Obviously, modern amenities. This was done in the early 80s, bathrooms. This was original beadboard that we did find, and we did restore some of that, and the window casing as part of the interior. Some of the wood floors were still there underneath the carpet. We repurposed those, and we'll show you photos of. This was our office in this space. Obviously, we modified it as we need to. A lot of the offices had acoustic tile ceiling. You couldn't see what the original ceiling was up there, so they can put modern lighting in. So all of these are just snapshots in time of when it was carved up into offices. This is the second floor. Again, carpet over the wood, acoustic tile ceiling. It's like, what's behind this? Well, it'll be revealed pretty soon once we get into the project. So our process here is basically photograph the heck out of it and learn about it. While we were photographing and doing drawings of this thing, we had a near miss with Hurricane Irma, and you can see a gaping hole that happened in the tower, and the ceiling came crashing down the second floor and left a mess. So obviously the building was saying, fix me, I need help. Okay, so after we do all that field measuring, we do what are called as-built drawings or documentation drawings. This shows the configuration of each floor. You can see all the little individual tenant spaces, the stairs going up. This is the second floor, larger tenant spaces, the hallway going down the side, and here's a little fire stair that came up the back. So, and then obviously we do all the elevations. So this is basically our starting point for doing any design work. We have to establish what is existing before we know how we're going to modify it to its new configuration. So this shows all four sides in its state. Okay, next part, once we get all that information together, we get into, well, the client asked us to study the building as a boutique hotel. And obviously we start out with, okay, well, what features do you need in this? What are your design goals? So the client came to us and said, hey, we need a minimum 16 rooms in the hotel to make the math work out. They had run other smaller boutique hotels in various parts of the country. This was their first venture into historic preservation. And they knew it was going to be a heavy lift. And they needed the math to work out. The other thing is they needed a full bar. The benefit of preservation, when you renovate a historic building, you get a full liquor license as an additional incentive. So if you could imagine, that was high on the list of design goals. So the other thing obviously is on-site parking. One of the things with hotels, especially in the city, you're required to have one parking space for every hotel room on site. So that all of a sudden we said, okay, we got 16 rooms, we need 16 spaces. How much is that room is that going to take up? Swimming pool they wanted an outdoor courtyard. Other wish list items are a housekeeping room for doing laundry sheets and all that. A hotel manager quarters if they were to live on site. And then obviously they were seeking the tax credits. Now the preservation tax credits are basically 20% of the cost of the restoration itself. You can take as a tax break, not only for your business, but your personal taxes for 10 years. So it sounds like it's a great deal, but the entry price is pretty high. So you gotta have to weigh the pros and cons of that. But it seemed to work out for our clients. So this is what they came to us with their design goals. So we started, the first step we do is look up all the codes. This is just a sampling of all the codes we have to dig through to, okay, if we're doing a 16-room hotel, what are the soft fire separation requirements, the type of construction, do we need a fire sprinkler system, all those kind of, that information we glean from the code books. From this, we basically compile what's called a feasibility study, where we do research, we give the client history of the building, the legal parameters of the property, what the local land development code restrictions are, what you're allowed to build, and what the building code says. These are the minimum things you need to upgrade for the building. And then we described also the preservation tax incentives, what that entails. There's a review process to get approval. And at the very end of all this, we compile an estimated cost of construction. And you can see it's anywhere from, at this early stage, 1.9 to 2.2 million. It was not that. And we'll discover why. Okay, so the first thing is, once we've done the feasibility study, we get into conceptual design. So, okay, what's the design concept? Now, let me kind of walk you through this. This is a site plan of the property. This little dashed line, everything to the right is actually the property that was associated with the schoolhouse. This property that was immediately available used to be a beauty salon, if you may recall.
I went there when I was in high school.
There you go. It was built in 1975. Well, they made an offer, and obviously it was enough of an offer for the owner to retire. And they decided, hey, what if we did our hotel manager office and quarters over here and housekeeping over there? Would it free up more space in the? I said, yes. Not only that, it frees up site area, because now we can do a little bit of parking here, a lot of parking on this side. Now we have room for a swimming pool. and the outdoor courtyard on this side. So this was the original concept site plan, which ended up being what we started doing construction drawings at, and we were able to put in 17 rooms into the hotel. So let me walk you through this is the concept first floor plan. You'll see where we come in the front door, stairs, all this we kept intact. This little area over here is what we call the principal's office, which is the bar. Very popular. We created a hallway down the center, and then we basically loaded both sides with guest rooms. You see there's 6 on this level. There's one larger one back here, which is our ADA compliant guest room with its bath. And then we did a handicap ramp, and we put it on the back side of the building. One of the things with preservation is you want to keep the visible pieces of the building as original as possible. Put all the guts behind on the lesser important sides before you start, you don't want to doll up the front with contemporary amenities. So this was the first floor layout. This is the second floor. You came up the stairs, you had 2 guest rooms here. This is our favorite one, number 8. Well, there's pictures of that, we'll get there. We go down a central corridor. Again, we have 6 rooms and a fire escape on that side. Go down this hallway, we have 2 rooms. So a total of 17. This is where the person who RSVP'd late to the wedding gets the small bedroom off the back. That's the tiniest one. But they said, hey, we'll just have a different rate for that one. For us, it was about beds available. And we did a mix of king and queen. They gave us a ratio that they were trying to meet because it helps with their number calculations and the finances. Okay, so now we've gotten a design. My time here. Now this is where the rubber hits the road. Well, before the rubber hits the road, you got to do drawings. You got to show construction plans of how is this thing going to be built. The first thing we do is do a checklist where we tell the owner, there's about 2,000 or more decisions you got to make before we can move forward. We don't need all the decisions up front, but we have a checklist that we keep saying, okay, these are all the decisions we got to make throughout the whole process. So once this checklist starts to get populated with all the decisions, then we get into construction drawings. With a historic building, especially in this case, we were required as part of the tax incentives to restore the wood windows. Well, how bad a shape are they in? Well, the contractor, we retained the services of Austin Historical to do the windows. And the first thing they did was, okay, what are the existing conditions? And this is just a snapshot of what they do. They're an individual assessment. So they photograph every window. They tell you what the problems are with it, if it's caulk shut, and what cracking paint, things that, how they were. There was plexiglass that was done on the inside because obviously those windows just leak like a sieve. All pictures, I don't think that's a good sign. There's not much wood left there. There's a screwdriver sticking into it. Obviously cracked glass. Now, what they do is they basically, as part of the restoration, they disassembled all the windows, cataloged where every window was, what was original, and what they could salvage. And they basically sorted all this and kept it at their factory as they reassemble it. But you can see that as they get into this, they're reconstructing all the original frames. But you can see how bad they were in terms of condition. This is one of the sashes, rotten wood at the ends. There's a piece of mutton missing. The corner's gone on this one. So they document, there probably was 200 pictures just in this report itself. So let me jump through this because we don't want to, I think once you see a rotten window picture, you see them all. Now this is the one that cracks me up Go back. This is too fun. Where is it? Okay. Notice the label they put on this. Pieces that fell off various sashes. So this is like, well, we found this. We don't know where they belong, but we got to take them with us just in case we could use them. So they were very meticulous in the process. So as part of that, we had to prepare a set of construction drawings that met the state and national requirement for the tax credits, which means the exterior shell we're having to restore. the interior, if there's any original materials, we have to repurpose them or restore those. So in our drawings, I mean, the sample that I'm going to show you here, these are only the architectural drawings. They don't include the mechanical, electrical, plumbing, all the guts. But you can see that there's quite a bit of information, everything from what's happening on the site to this is demolition of what's coming out, what's being salvaged. These are the floor plans, and there's just a bunch of information that we're required to compile. Window and door schedules. We had to document all the openings, which ones are salvaged, which ones are new. Cross sections of how the windows are installed, both old and new, and what the exterior is going to look like with its new configuration. You can see the front. We redid the steps and railing, the handicap ramp on the side. We put it on the back side of the building. This is the rear of the building where we did the fire escape. We did that in metal. And then we just did a new side porch that comes out of the bar. Cross sections of the building, details, and it just goes on ad nauseum. So after we get all these drawings done, we get it priced from a contractor. The contractor then starts the permitting process. In our case, we were so special, it took us 2.5 months to get a permit.
Wow.
Which was painful. And it's like, meanwhile, the client is paying taxes on that unused building because there's nobody paying rent anymore. They're all vacated. We left. And so did all the other tenants. So we said, can we get started at anything? So the first steps we did was start to salvage what we could on the interior. They let us get an interior demolition permit to be able to pull off some of the finishes. And that's where, as we said, the rubber hits the road. Here's demo on the first floor inside. I don't know if you recall, this was our office's conference room. And you can see that when the acoustic tile ceiling stopped right here, and then it went up. And we'll start to see what kind of pieces and parts get revealed as all of this starts to get opened up. And you can see the original plaster, lath, all that was, most of that was concealed above the acoustic tile ceiling. Now you can see this open plan on the first floor. You'll see the old plaster, again, concealed. The acoustic tile was right here at this line. So none of that was revealed. And so all of a sudden, hey, what's up there? The stairs. Oh, this was one of the fun parts. Once we took off the rug that was covering it, we found this. This is a patch plate on the landing. And if you imagine how many kids' shoes had to go marching up those stairs for a hole to show up right here at that pivot point. And then for somebody to meticulously put a little, what looked like lead little patch right here. And we said, oh, hang on a second, we got to save that. So we did, and we'll show you what became of it. But it's the things that you uncover, that's all part of the journey. We enjoyed the things that are revealed. The other things that get revealed are things like fire damage. Obviously, in an old building, how was it heated? Well, in most cases, there were little pot-belly stoves that connected via flue up to the chimneys. In some cases, those flues would catch fire or scorch the lumber underneath. Sometimes they get covered up, sometimes they don't. And you'll see that in some cases, you can see this is brick. In some cases, we did have wood lath or sheathing, which is required usually in contemporary construction. But we noticed, as we marched through time here, that on the old building, there was no sheathing at all. All you saw was studs and brick. Naked, no insulation, nothing. So in a lot of cases, there was water damage. Like that one, you can see where this is the addition that was later. You see there's wood that's on the outside of the studs, so you don't see much of the brick except where it's rotted out. And you can see that's the back side of the brick. Again, this is the original 1886. There's no sheathing. All you see is the bare studs and the brick. Now, when we peeled off the interior finish, our big red flag was you could see daylight through the brick. And we had only budgeted, I want to say 28 to 30 grand for just some tuck pointing. Tuck pointing is basically wherever there's mortar missing from brick, you scrape it out and you put some new stuff in and you patch it. So we did an assessment just based on square footage. Well, that's all fine when you're looking at it from the outside, but when you're looking at it from the inside and you see that there's nothing but daylight poking through, you're in for a big repointing job. And that was one of the big change order items that we ran into. Again, more fire damage from the old heating stoves. Here is corner that is currently in the principal's office bar, but you can see there's no sheathing. There's just the stud and the brick, and that's what was holding this whole thing up. As opposed to, so you can see here's a comparison, 1886, 1909, there is sheathing. The sheathing helps with diagonal bracing of the wood framing. So it's surprising that the building was actually built pretty well considering it's lasted this long. Now this is all kind of the bare bones as everything is revealed before we get into new construction. They, all the windows go away and we basically ended up plywood shutter over them while it's being repaired. Okay, this is one of the examples of, okay, this brick's gone. And it's funny because the worst of it was on the later edition. The orange brick was just such poor quality that in a lot of cases it just did not survive very well. So that we had to do a test because of preservation tax incentives, we're required to match the brick color and the mortar color of the original building. And we had to use a salvage brick. So we were able to find salvage brick from a warehouse that was demolished in Jacksonville. And you can see we did a color comparison. This is what it looks like with the 1909 orange brick, as we call it. And this is what it looked like next to the 1886 red brick. So we felt that it was a good color option as we bridged those two buildings. So we used that brick as infill where we were able to remove the old damaged brick. We did areas where we had to test cleaning of the mortar to see how well it was going to do. Again, you can see there's just some gaping holes. Here was a mortar cleaning sample just to see whether it would survive a cleaning process. Here is where we started testing the actual makeup of the mortar. The thing is with historic buildings is it's a line-based mortar. It's a soft mortar. It's intended to let the building move a little bit in between all the bricks. In contemporary construction, that's typically concrete-based. And you'll notice on some parts of the building, they came back with concrete as repaired. Well, what that ended up doing is prevented the brick from expanding, contracting, which means the face of the brick would pop off. So we had to repoint the entire building. And what that means is you scrape out the old mortar and you come back with new. So not only did we have to do a particular formula for the mortar, we had to match what the mortar joint looked like. And in detail, this is called a reeded brick mortar joint. You see that's got a little stick was embedded into it. So all our new stuff had to match the old stuff. So as you can imagine, our budget of 28 to 30,000 quickly multiply that by 10, and that's what the impact was. But obviously that was an important reveal early on, and the owner said, well, if we're going to do this, let's do this right. And so they repointed that entire building more than they actually needed to in order to make it work out. So what's the results? Oh, good. We're good on time. Okay, completion. This is before, the front. This is after. And even though this is a night shot, the incredible part is you'll notice how the brick just kind of pops because all those brick joints are new. They were matched the original in color and texture in that joint, and it's like the building is almost like it was minted yesterday. It was beautiful. And you can see the tower we reconstructed. It's in much better condition than it was before. Okay, this is the east side, before, after. So this is that side court, what we call the playground. They have a little putting green over here, little tables that come out of the bar. You can see where all of these windows got restored, and the interesting part was that little corner that was in such bad shape. This is that corner that had a mechanical, that had a roof leak over here. Brick was just all coming out. There's before, there's after. So we keep, obviously the building's got its own stories. This probably was an old door opening coming out to the porch, and we just left it. Just leave it. We're not using it as an opening. There's, I think, one of the guest rooms is back there. So, but that's part of the history we want to keep revealing as we go in. Here's the back side, the parking lot side, and here's after. This is where we put the swimming pool. Here's, you can see just beyond where the handicap rack comes in, so the handicap access is there. And there it is on that little side porch that we added. Okay, here's the lobby before. Here's the lobby after. Obviously, we did doors that were a little more historically accurate than what was there originally. And because the original tile was gone, we were able to do something a little more unique there. We did keep the old railings, you can see each side. The before stair, after. So all that got, we kept all the original trim, restained it. There's the patch plate before when we found it. And if you can see it, it's way over here. In the after, and they put a little grandfather clock right there in that little niche that we discovered in that landing. So it worked out perfectly. Okay, before, after. This is the principal's office bar. The top of that bar was actually made from some of the salvaged lumber that we had to remove in order to put the elevator shaft in. So that bar top is all historic material that's been repurposed. All these are the original hardwood floors. We basically removed them, replaned them, reset them over a new subfloor. And it's, in fact, in some places you can still see this weird little nail pattern of 3 little nails. And we realized it was where the school desks were screwed to the floor in a pattern. It's like, oh my God. Those are the things that we just love because it just gives us, a sense of what that building was used for. So sprinkled throughout, you'll still see those. We left those in the wood because it made sense. There's that salvage bar top. It seemed to work out very well. Okay, second floor, one of the guest rooms, before, after. Obviously, they took very painstaking, that whole schoolhouse motif was brought in to the interior. Again, we kept the original wainscoting. You can see it here, the original window casing, the original floor. Here's another guest room, number 9. Bathrooms, we did, again, here's the original wainscot, the original casing, and then we just did a tile that seemed to be vintage, but a contemporary version of that. Okay, this is that little beauty salon next door. This is before. This is after. We basically, this is our housekeeping, and this is our hotel manager quarters. And we basically just did a paver parking lot, and we painted the brick to match our stucco color so that the two buildings kind of match together. And there we go. Now, the benefit of having a client that has the wherewithal to stick with the journey is that sometimes it's worthy of awards. So one of the things we did apply for was a Florida Trust for Historic Preservation, a grant where we did win a prize for the adaptive reuse. And the award went to not only us as the architects, but the contractor and the owners. And we're very proud of it because it helps us kind of justify our existence, so to speak, and makes the journey worthwhile. So that's about all I've got. Unless I'll open up the questions, hopefully.
I did have something to say. The principal's office is public, so if you want to go in and see, you should definitely go over and have a drink and see what the ambiance is like.
Yes.
Great place.
Yes.
The best way to enjoy the principal's office is on the first and third Wednesday of the month by taking a museum pub crawl, because that's
nice. Good tie-in. Great. Any questions? Yes.
Start to finish, how long did this journey take you?
The big struggle was during the construction time frame. Not only the delay getting permits, but when we discovered we had to repoint the building, that extended the construction time frame by almost 4 months. So for the time we did a feasibility study in the summer of 2017, they weren't done until early 2019 before they opened the door, were able to open the door.
Still pretty.
So it's still about a year and a half, and that was pretty fast considering how much work we had to get into. Yes?
Some of the story of the brickwork reminds me of the old jail.
Yes, you're exactly right.
Yeah.
All these brick buildings tell their tales, and you can see it on the outside and the inside, at least when you reveal it. And it's interesting to see some of the other historic buildings that we work with have the same kind of techniques that have been used. Yes, sir.
Now, you said the initial estimate, and then you said it ended up being substantially
Yes.
more. What were the numbers?
From what I understand, it ended up around $3 million, but that did not include any of the interior furnishings or equipment. That was really just the hard cost for the building itself, the pool, and the grounds. So I think once they were all in, they were probably close to 3.5. Now, I don't know what their tax incentives, I wasn't involved in that. That's probably, private information, but I know that occupancy, even with COVID, has been pretty good. It's been a draw. It certainly is a great new repurposing of a historic building, which had fallen into some disrepair. I mean, obviously, when you rent out, carve up a building into offices, there's only so much rent you can get. And especially with a historic building where you've got to maintain a lot of it, sometimes the numbers just don't work out. For this to be, it was a perfect match in terms of being able to be used as a hotel, but also the piece of the puzzle that unlocked it was that beauty salon next door, which, it was from architecture, history, it was a nothing building, but it offered so much more as part of this project.
Well, and the piece that also makes it, they didn't have to worry about putting in a restaurant or anything else.
Yes.
Because they're right here near downtown.
Exactly right. And they stayed in their lane. That's important to note that a lot of their other small boutique, they don't have a restaurant on site. They try not to do food service. They will have a bar, but they know their model, and that's important. A client who knows what they want going in makes our life a lot easier. You're not having to kind of hold their hand through the process. So they knew what they wanted, and we were able to deliver on that. Yes, Karen.
I'm just wondering about the foundation of the whole building.
It is it is off-grade framed, which it means that there's a crawl space underneath. And I remember when we had our offices
And
in there.
things have crawled there.
Yes. Yes, we have heard a hawk flying underneath the crawl space because it was a gaping hole going after a squirrel in that little battle that ensued. It's like, oh my God, traumatized. So the foundation was in pretty good shape. We didn't have to do much. In the middle of the building where we put the elevator, we did have to carve out some areas, remove some piers, and remove some old beams, and those beams got repurposed as the bar.
You didn't really show that.
No, because a lot of that stuff had already been done by the time, we had jumped ahead on getting the floors settled before we did any of the major demolition work. So that unfortunately we weren't there every day when things happened.
I was just wondering, do you know the manufacturer of the elevators? What they put in nowadays?
Well, this one was an Otis elevator, if I recall. Yeah. But yeah, one of the interesting parts is because we're required to have vertical accessibility as part of the code, is like, where do you put it so it doesn't become an eyesore? For us, internalizing it was important, so it wasn't an addition to the outside. And keeping the historic stair was important, so it kind of sold itself to be in the center of the building, and it worked off of that. Yeah. Yes?
Where are the owners from?
Oh, good question. They live here in Florida. I don't know much detail except one is down in Puerto Vedra and the other one's in Jacksonville. They do own another hotel in Southwest, I think Sanibel Island. I don't know how well it did. They do have a sister hotel over in North Carolina. They just, I think, sold one in Lake Tahoe that they, so they only have a small handful of hotels.
Great locations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes?
The masons who came in to do all the repointing, where did they come from?
They were Jacksonville based. Yeah. Yeah, we do have good local mason here, but the scope of this was so big and they needed so much crew to accomplish this that even with 4 months of added time, it was a struggle. So, yes.
My second question is, what are the hours of the bar? Because I
Oh, hang on! Look, somebody out of window! Just talk.
I jumped on that one. If you're staying there, they'll start at 3. If it's a pub crawl, they'll, or if it's the public, they start at 4.
Yes.
And the pub crawl starts at 5. First and third Wednesday. That's your 1 hour high.
Where do you need to
This-
start that?
Well, you gotta talk to me first.
Look at this gentleman up here.
Kind of following up on her question, okay, so you had people come in and redo all the windows using some of the old wood
Yep.
and
Mhm.
making new wood, and also all the other woodwork, the floors and the ceiling, everything. Were those local contractors also, or do you have to go kind of?
Some were. The window restoration company was out of Jacksonville. They're the kind that can handle a project of this size. Some of the local subs were some of the trim carpenters, and I believe some who had done this foundation piers, and some of the painters. I think was the limit of what we were able to the contractor use locally.
But it was a general contractor out of Jacksonville.
Yes, it was a contract out of Jacksonville. We did.
And he was experienced in doing.
Yes,
restoration.
exactly right. So he was experienced in restoration work. We still actually work with him on other projects. It takes a special breed of someone. The problem locally that we have found is most of the contractor are residential, custom residential based, and that doesn't necessarily translate over to preservation work. It takes a lot more hand-holding, on-site supervision, those kind of things that a bigger firm needs to handle. Yes, sir.
First of all, I just want to compliment you. I can't believe how fortunate we are to have your services in this community.
Thank you so much. Well, I know I don't do this on my own. My wonderful wife is also. She's also an architect. We met in college, actually measuring a historic building in St. Augustine, where that's where the spark started. But she keeps me on track. She's the one that actually does a lot of the as-built drawings because she loves diving into those details.
I count a lot of bricks.
Yes. Yes,
Also,
Karen.
I have to say about Lori, I've known her a long time because, as you mentioned, she could tell you the dates by looking at what the
Yes.
students were wearing.
Exactly right.
And Lori used to do the
Nothing
costumes
like
for
a little
the
theater design.
Bernardino.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So did Don Shaw own the building when they bought it?
No, it was actually when the hotel people bought it. It was a partnership with the Gillette brothers locally and Clayton Buchanan. Yeah, Don Shaw was the previous owner. Yes.
And so they bought it basically on a contingency. I mean, that they bought it and said, and then came to you after the purchase.
No. They had us do the feasibility study before they made an offer. They wanted to know how deep of a pool they were jumping into. So at least we gave them a track, be able to tell them what the journey was going to be before they committed to signing on. Yes, sir.
Following up sort of on the feasibility study, obviously you ran into some unexpected surprises which significantly increased the cost
Yes.
to the client. Can you talk at all about things that you do or steps that you take to identify or quantify as many of those at the time of the feasibility study, so there are as few surprises?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. The hard part with preservation work is, if we could look through walls, we would be the best architects ever. and could anticipate everything. What we tell people, especially before they jump in, is that you need to give yourself a contingency. And that contingency grows in size based on how old your building is. So in this case, even though we gave them, hey, it's a 2.2, I would give yourself at least a 20% contingency. That was just still short of what we ran into with the brick. But again, it takes the right client to do that, because what you don't want to do, especially the contractor can't give you, on these type of projects, he can't give you a lump sum and say, I can do it for X, because there's still a lot of unknowns. It's very rare that you're able to get into a historic building, peel off all the skin, reveal everything before you start a project. We are going to do that on a couple of other buildings that we're restoring downtown, where the buildings have been vacant for a while, so we do have access and can peel and find out more. In this case, the building was occupied. There's only so much you can do while people are occupying the building. So you do your best educated guess and prepare the client for the worst. But again, it depends on the client as well as how receptive they are. Because this was their first preservation project. From what I hear, the numbers worked out and they would do one again, even with what they ended up on this one, because the tax incentives were worth it. Now because of the tax incentives, they're required to restore or keep that exterior facade for 10 years without any changes or revisions to it. After that, then it's strictly whatever the local municipality would allow. But essentially the feds keep their hands off after that 10-year period. Yes, ma'am.
Just as a side note, my grandmother attended the school, and she said the biggest thing that happened was when Dr. Wass, one of the first 2 cars on the island, drove down. All the kids ran to the windows watching this contraption go down the street.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
It is great.
Yes.
Yeah, I was wondering too, speaking of going to school, if Kate Bailey may have gone there. She was born, I believe, in 1874, which would put her in that school, I would guess. Maybe with her grandmother. I don't know. Oh, no, your grandmother wouldn't have been born that early.
No, she was born in 1903.
Yeah.
Great. Well, yes, sir.
I've heard, but I'm not sure it's true, that there's a time capsule underneath the cornerstone, and that you did not disturb the cornerstone.
Yeah, correct. We did not disturb the cornerstone. We hear those rumors as well, but we let sleeping dogs lie. There's always, it's always interesting to see what is in there. And just as an aside, because we were in that building for 7 or 8 years, we had some incidents in that building that we cannot explain. Now, none of them made us feel uneasy, but it was just a reality that old buildings have history, and sometimes that history wants to reach out and touch you. So, not to scare you, but we felt that there was somebody other than us in that office on certain days. But again, that's a whole presentation for a different day. But we are working on, I know people are probably curious what other work we're doing locally. We've just completed drawings for the standard marine building renovation. That one is intended to be a cafe and restaurant on the first floor, 10-room boutique hotel second floor, and a rooftop deck venue. So that's currently being priced by the contractor, and hopefully they'll be able to get started sometime this summer. That building has been long overdue for some help. We're also working on the marina restaurant restoration. That one's a longer journey, but it's a client who knows what he's doing because he's done things in town like the Amelia Tavern and those kind of places. So our first step there is to get rid of the sins of contemporary finishes that have been added to that building. So our first step is to peel off the stucco to reveal the brick and the tabby that's underneath. So that's going to be an interesting journey. That one is naked and fully accessible inside, so we've been able to learn a lot of things from the interior. And then the other one that we're working on is the current resident of Pablo's, who's moving to their new Center Street location. That building and the building next door that used to be Dog Star Saloon, I believe. They were both C.H. Hewitt buildings, built at 2 different times and interconnected later in life. We're going to interconnect them again. It used to be 1878, then Pablo's. Both of that will become what's called its working title is the Tiger Island Room. It'll be a bar, music venue situation for a portion of the building. The rest will be a future tenant that hasn't been decided yet. But that's another preservation and restoration project. They want to do it right. We're restoring the cast iron storefront on one of the historic buildings. All the windows are being restored. Any additions we do are on the back.
Will Marina's be a restaurant again then?
Marina will be a restaurant, allegedly seafood and oyster bar. The menu hasn't been set, but it will be a restaurant. And both floors will be a restaurant. Not just, because before it used to be just one floor and then offices above. All right, thank you.
Thank you all for coming. We hope to see you at the June brown bag.
Thank you every time I go to St. Michael's.
Oh, is that right? Good. That's one of our favorite things. I usually do a talk on St. Michael.